Hello, everyone. This is Bill Griffin. Welcome to Different Take Podcast. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share, comment. Really appreciate you watching. New episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm doing this episode as of November 7th, 2022. It's the day before Election Day. And one of the things, maybe the main thing that Democrats are running on, you can see the social media and in the general media or the legacy media especially, they're pushing this. If you don't vote for Democrats, you don't care about democracy, you're fascist, you may be racist, you are okay with authoritarian government. And I recently read an op-ed, or just saw an op-ed that was written a day or two ago, and I want to talk about that at the end, which kind of represent this idea. But the legacy media, or institutional, left-wing, mainstream, whatever you want to call them, are pushing this idea that democracy is going to be destroyed. Now, most people don't think this, and I think I'll show you this, actually. In your daily lives, you interact with people that don't vote Democrat, and I've never heard this, that we want to get rid of elections because the 2020 election is questionable for a lot of people. So I'm talking to this friend, and he made the comment that for many years, the institutional media have come to understand that many of their viewers are not going to independently check out the information that they're being given. And there's a lot of truth to this, I believe, because these institutions lie and lie and lie again, and I've talked about this many times on other episodes. But I want to talk about how we got to this point where democracy is about to be destroyed, or that's the pitch. I'll start with Donald Trump being elected 2016. He was also immediately, they were talking about Russian collusion. And this is the headline. It's on NPR. Very straightforward. Mueller report finds no evidence of Russian collusion. Notice the date, March 24th, 2019. So Donald Trump's elected November 2016, and for years, finally 2019, there's this Mueller report, and the MSNBCs, they stopped covering it because of this report. And all these institutions spent hundreds of $millions of broadcast time, tens of thousands of hours talking about the Mueller report and speculating about it. There is no probable cause in this instance, to investigate Donald Trump. What is probable cause? It's a reasonable basis to believe that a crime has been committed. There's no such basis. This was entirely a waste of time. So, not long after that, there's a phone call with Ukraine and a whistleblower. And, of course, it takes some time, but this is another fishing expedition. Impeachment, in my opinion, most Americans, I think, would agree with me, that there ought to be widespread agreement that, in the case of the President of the United States, that this will actually occur. So there was an impeachment of Bill Clinton. The Senate did not vote to convict or remove Bill Clinton from office. Along comes Donald Trump. Twice. Failure. Because of this idea that, well, we're just going to sully our opponent. And in Donald Trump's case, and many politicians have said that, I will do everything it takes to prevent him from becoming president. And when you hear everything it takes, well, what does that mean? Does that mean violence? So from March 19, when the Mueller report comes out that there's no Russian collusion, 6 months later, there's an impeachment. House voted for impeachment December 19. It took 6 months to come up with the whistleblower. The phone call took place, I think, sometime in the fall or maybe the summer. To give you an idea what a waste of time this is. This is Adam Schiff in a short portion of his closing argument to the Senate.
CBS News reported last night that a Trump confidant said that GOP senators were warned, vote against your president, vote against the president, and your head will be on a pike. Now, I don't know if that's true.
In the first impeachment trial regarding Ukraine, doesn't know if it's true. Doesn't know if it's true. So why are you talking about it if you don't know that it's true? Isn't that amazing that this guy gets this sort of attention, one of the sleaziest politicians in the history of Congress? I'm not saying anything criminal, but he lies again. And here he's overtly saying, I don't know if it's true, but I'm going to talk about it. What an amazing thing that the media props up someone like Adam Schiff as if they're important. So along comes COVID in March of 2020, just shortly after the impeachment trial in the Senate. And this is at the beginning, Republicans, Democrats are alike, were kind of on the same page for a very short period of time that the world needed to be shut down to save everyone. And here's a short clip of Deborah Birx talking about, we don't know, but our projections show that there's a benefit to shutdowns. And this is her.
In the middle and the end with community. It is community and the community of the American people that are going to have to do the things for the next 30 days to make a difference.
So they're showing that there's a benefit to shutdown. It could be 1 million deaths, could be 2 million deaths avoided if it's shut down. Well, the truth is, we don't know that. There's been no, I doubt the government will ever be honest with us about what if there was a benefit, or if it would have been better if everyone had behaved as they were to avoid the costs from shutdown, not just the financial costs. I've been involved in a documentary on this. Check it out on the channel. It's called Pros and Con Artists. Cost of COVID-19. But you were a terrible person if you even asked about the cost, because you weren't trying to save people. And it was 2 weeks, and it's to flatten the curve, and then she's talking about 30 days there in that press conference. And the way this went down was local governments initiated the shutdowns. In my state, Georgia, that's what happened. And then Brian Kemp issued a shelter-in-place order for extended period of time, which is interesting that local governments who, when questioned today, would say, well, we don't have the resources to tell you whether there was a benefit or not. Well, if you don't have the resources to tell us whether there's a benefit or not, why are you taking the lead on shutting the economy down and stopping kids from going to school and instilling fear and all that sort of thing? But this was an opening for Democrats to change voting procedures. And in my state, there was a number of questionable things in 2020, in the 2020 election. And to start with, massive amounts of voting by mail that had never occurred before. So you have a sleazy Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, is Republican, claiming that all was well, but you have a lot of citizens with a lot of complaints, and he put up, stonewalled a lot of legal procedures and so forth and so on after the election in 2020. There's a lot of Democrats who would say, well, the courts, there was no evidence of fraud because the courts all ruled against whoever the plaintiffs were. Well, courts don't want to get involved in elections, and nor should they. That would be a threat to democracy if courts got involved to a great deal, to a great degree. So you have to have, there really has to be the legislature getting involved when it comes to elections. Legislature did in Georgia eventually, and they were castigated for it because you remember the Major League Baseball was moved, and because the legislation that was going to clean up a lot of these procedures that people had questions about they were being vilified in the national media and also even by the CEOs of Delta and Coca-Cola, which are in Atlanta. Point of all that is COVID started the ball rolling. Democrats saw a great advantage to prevent Donald Trump from being reelected, and they were okay with these voting changes. They saw an opportunity there, in my opinion, and so did the national institutional media. Right before the election, you remember, Hunter Biden laptop came out, and there was a letter put out to give Joe Biden cover. This is an excerpt in regard to the Hunter Biden laptop. It is for all these reasons that we write to say that the arrival in the U.S. political scene of emails purportedly belonging to Vice President Biden's son, Hunter, much of it related to his time serving on the board of Ukraine gas company Burisma, has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. We want to emphasize that we do not know if the emails provided to the New York Post by President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, are genuine or not, and that we do not have evidence of Russian involvement, just that our experience makes us deeply suspicious that the Russian government played a significant role in this case. If we are right, this is Russia trying to influence how Americans vote in this election, and we believe strongly that the Americans need to be aware of this. So the media suppressed this story. Facebook, Twitter, ABC, CBS, so the list goes on. The institutional establishment media that leans left did not want to report this. Did they know? We want to emphasize that we do not know if the emails provided to the New York Post are genuine or not. So this is totally made up. As we all know now, New York Times, many other organizations say, yep, Hunter Biden is, this is his laptop. And even without the laptop, there was plenty of probable cause to investigate Joe Biden for influence peddling during his time as vice president and shortly after. And make no mistake about it, this is one of the reasons that the impeachment trial took place, which I referred to earlier. So this timeline just keeps going where the media is doing everything they can to prop up Joe Biden. And since Biden is elected, the big one is January 6th. Complete, utter failure of the Capitol Police to prevent folks from entering the U.S. Capitol while legislators were in there conducting their business to decide about the 2022 election. Complete, utter failure. But then we don't talk about that. What they talk about is Donald Trump. There's just not a connection between Donald Trump's speech that day and the actions of the people that entered the building. It's been well documented. There was an impeachment trial on this subject. No conviction. There's very little nexus to his words and the actions of the people that were let in. But the media doesn't talk about the complete failure of the Capitol Police. So, since that time, the word election denier has come about. If you ask 50 different people what election denier definition of one is, you probably get 50 different answers. So Joe Biden has said white supremacy is domestic threat, the biggest domestic threat, that Republicans are, they're fascist, they want to destroy democracy. Many Democrats have said that in this election. And so here is an op-ed. A title is, "It Can Happen Here, It Is Happening Here." It can happen here, it is happening here. Sorry about that. By Glenn Altshuler, Glenn Altshuler, I looked him up. He is an academic with Cornell University and a professor of American Studies. Well, I want to read some excerpts of this op-ed. This I think, kind of tie up what the insanity of this election and how the legacy media gets away with this, because a lot of people just don't know any different. They may think election deniers are people that don't want to have elections anymore. I don't know what, he doesn't define the word election denier, but here's some excerpts. And with at least 345 election deniers on the ballot in the midterms, including candidates for governor, secretary of state, attorney general, and seats in the state legislature, who, if elected, will have a significant impact on how future elections are conducted and votes are counted, the doomsday clock is ticking. Interesting choice of words. I don't know what he means by election deniers. People that question the processes which in the election, or question the results because the processes were very much different. There were a lot of irregularities that were reported in Georgia. Voting by mail was had never been done before, and the voting counting processes were suspect in a lot of places. People have a right to question what the processes were. Does that mean you say, oh, I know who won the election? Or questioning who won the election, what the will of the people is. But this is, according to this gentleman, the doomsday clock is ticking because these 345 election deniers might just get elected. I'll go on a little further. In a poll conducted by New York Times and Siena College, more than 70% of Americans agreed that democracy at risk, but only 7% identified this issue as the most important challenge facing the country. So this gentleman's belly aching because only 7% identify this as anything beyond a very low risk. If you ask the question, 70% of Americans agree that democracy is at risk. Well, it's always at risk. Everything kind of is always at risk. The thing is, what is the risk? And he doesn't tell you what the actual question of the poll was. He goes on a little later. That said, studies by the University of Chicago Project on Security and Threats indicate that about 18 million Americans agree the use of force is justified to restore Donald Trump to the presidency. 8 million of them own guns, 2 million have served in the military, 6 million support militia groups like the Oath Keepers or extremist organizations like the Proud Boys. Okay. He does not tell you, and who knows if the study is accurate, he does not tell you how many millions of Americans agree that the use of force is justified to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president again. And how many of them own guns, and how many of them serve in the military, and how many of them belong to extremist organizations. He doesn't tell you that. So if you're sitting there, you don't think about the other side of things, you just take it for granted. Oh my gosh, 18 million Americans agree the use of force is justified. So our democracy is at stake. Well, you could say that, you could reverse it, as I just said. Interesting thing is, I'm not familiar with these groups, Oath Keepers or Proud Boys. Have they ever been interviewed on, have they done any interviews? Has anyone really talked about have they been infiltrated by media organizations or even the government? It's kind of I don't know what they are, but you refer to them as if they're extremist organizations, but you don't actually go to the trouble of, the media organizations don't actually go to the trouble of interviewing them or researching them or talking about them at length. That's my take on that. A little later in this article, According to surveys conducted by medical and public health scientists at the University of California, Davis, about 7 million Americans believe political violence is usually or always justified. 7 million out of 350 million. About 28 million claim that they are willing to threaten or intimidate, 22 million to injure, and 18 million to kill someone to accomplish an important political goal. His number is, just going through the numbers here, 7 million believe political violence is usually always justified, and then he mentions a lot more people than that are okay with, a lot more than 7 are okay with threatening violence. 22 million is a higher number than 7. 18 million to kill is a higher number than 7. So that's a weird number there. But this makes a great case for not having voting by mail, except in very, very small circumstances where you would have a legitimate excuse that you can't go to the polling stations. And it would be such a small people voting by mail that it wouldn't be worth. There would be no payoff because it's such a small number. The vast majority of people will vote by mail, according to these numbers, because you have, and I've said this before, how you could seed or sell your vote, seed your vote to a family member. Maybe a family member intimidates you into voting or threatens you to vote a certain way, coerces you, harasses you. But what about apartment building? You go to an apartment building, you knock on the door. Hello, have you voted yet? Are you voting by mail? Would you like some help? Could I help you with it? Could I maybe they're physically intimidating, and maybe they have that sort of appearance. Would you like me to tell you who to vote for? Would you like me to take your vote? I'll make it easy for you. I'll take your vote to the drop box for you. So I mentioned this to Democrat candidates running for Secretary of State and Congress and state reps, so forth. And they're really perplexed by this question. So this gentleman's saying clearly, you can't have both ways, that 28 million people claim that they are willing to threaten or intimidate, 22 million to injure, and 18 million to kill someone to accomplish an important political goal. But you won't knock on a door and you won't harass or intimidate someone that's your neighbor, but you're willing to kill them. I think voting by mail is a really bad idea. A lot of people think the same thing, and this is the primary reason. He makes a great point for it, but I guarantee you this guy is adamantly opposed to restricting voting by mail. He wants it wide open. I guarantee you that's what he's all about. And this is the summary of this op-ed from, his name is Glenn Altschuler, Altschuler. This is thehill.com. Can happen here is happening here. He says, once lost, democratic norms and institutions are very difficult to restore. That's true. I believe that's true. The time to stop the steal, the real steal, not the groundless claims about fraud in the 2020 election, is now. It must begin by repudiating politically motivated violence, election deniers and enablers, and ending restriction on and intimidation of all Americans who are qualified to vote. Well, again, who would not agree with repudiating politically motivated violence? And many of the people that have questions about the 2020 election have done this over and over and over again. They've repudiated politically motivated violence. The question is, if there's violence, there should be criminal charges. I don't know what he's getting there. That's hard to, by his numbers, the vast, vast majority of Americans do not have a huge problem with violence. Matter of fact, it's on the news all the time. That's a big thing that Republicans are running on this year is violence. And if you remember the 2020 election, that whole year, there was tons of violence committed, not by people on the far right, but people on the far left, especially young people. And a lot of looting, a lot of vandalism, and there were some injuries and death due to the riots that occurred that year. That the mainstream media lauded, they praised it. There's even a famous video of an MSNBC reporter saying it's mainly peaceful while fires are raging behind him. His name is Ali Velshi. I did an episode on him recently. Election denier is a catch-all phrase, so then you can throw in fascists. Oh, well, that refers to Republicans as well. End of your freedoms, authoritarian government, trying to scare you into voting for Democrats, which is the thing that they used to do, and particularly in the campaign of George Bush. They said that George Bush the campaign ran ads that tried to scare people into voting for them, into voting for Republicans. So the same thing that they claim Republicans were doing, they're doing. I remember in the election of 2020 talking to people, and they were concerned that if Donald Trump was declared the winner, that there would be massive violence, not the other way around. The Capitol Police, the only violence that occurred in the United States, if you want to, and it really, the Capitol, the folks that entered the Capitol, there weren't widespread reports of violence. They called it an insurrection. You remember there was when the governor in Wisconsin, candidate for president Scott Walker was in office. There were a number of sit-ins at the Wisconsin State Capitol. Look, Capitol Police had kept those folks out on January 6th. It was an utter failure, as I said many times. But Democrats have used that incident to label all Republicans fascist. They're violent. It's the end of your freedoms. And even the Democrat today, James Clyburn, or maybe it was yesterday, is comparing Republicans to Nazi Germany. And that's where we're headed. We're headed to Nazi Germany. It's a shame. It's a shame that they've resorted to this sort of tactics. There will be an election in 2024. It's a very, the risk of there not being elections are very, very low. Democrats look like they're not going to like the outcome in 2022. So they're trying to scare people into voting their way. And I think it'll backfire. I really do. I think it'll backfire when people say, hey, but they don't look back. They get this information in. You would think in a couple of years they say, oh, there is an election, but they forget that the media said these things in 2022. And, well, that's just the media. Not everything that they say is true. So that's my episode today. I'm going to do another episode on the outcome of the election. I hope you'll check that out. And thank you for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe, like, share, comment. Thank you.